Welcome to Iron Man Crammed. This is the 2008 comic book adaptation that kickstarted the most successful cinematic universe in movie history, helped in no small part by the direction of Jon Favreau and the on-screen presence of Robert Downey Jr. Let's go. In Afghanistan, under military escort, charismatic billionaire Tony Stark comes under fire from unseen assailants that appear to be armed with his own technology. They are quickly overpowered, and despite the bulletproof vest, Tony finds himself gravely wounded. It's a terrorist kidnapping. But first, let's go back a bit. Son of legendary weapons developer Howard Stark, Tony was considered a genius from a very young age, and grew to take over Stark Industries following Howard's death with the support of his father's friend, Obadiah Stane. James Rhodes, his military liaison, is ready to present him with an award, but Obadiah has to fill the gap in Tony's absence. He's too busy living the high life and not really respecting anything, especially hot young reporters that challenge him for being a merchant of death. She is right, but also not immune to his endless charm and state-of-the-art Malibu seafront villa. Well, Pepper Potts, Tony's assistant, takes out the trash, whilst he works endlessly on building projects and forgetting her birthday. Heading in late for a military meeting, Rhodey isn't happy to be kept waiting, but that irresponsible high life does come with a certain gusto, and he's flown to Afghanistan to pitch his latest range of Jericho missiles to the US Army, which is where all the trouble started. Undergoing some form of surgery, he awakes in a cave cell hooked up to a battery for an electromagnet that is stopping pieces of deeply embedded shrapnel from reaching his heart. He's been saved from death by a doctor and fellow hostage. A terrorist force called the 10 Rings want him to build a Jericho missile for them, and after some persuading, put him to work with a lot of stolen weapons. He knows that they will kill him regardless, but the doctor encourages him to take action. So Tony requests materials to get working, and the very first thing he builds is a miniaturized arc reactor to replace the temporary fix. But it's also capable of large amounts of energy, for he's not building a missile, but a way to break free. His captors are none the wiser until their educated leader Raza takes a look for himself and ups the deadline. So with the last pieces complete, Tony dons his iron armor. The guards are already alerted, but it's going to take a moment to initialize, so the doctor runs out to buy him more time. Once going, the power armor makes mincemeat out of the terrorists. It's clunky, but terrifying. Raza tries to finish him off, but an improvised missile returns him a rockfall instead. However, the doctor has been gravely wounded and lies dying. His own family is already dead, and after their captive time together, he begs Tony not to waste his life. So he marches out to face the rest of the terrorists, and instead wastes them. He burns the men and their stolen munition supplies, and ends up taking the brunt of heavy weapons fire before activating his rocket escape as the terrorist base blows up in a huge explosion. But that suit was built from repurposed parts, and he crashes in the desert. Luckily though, the ruckus has alerted the attention of the military, who, led by Rhodey, eventually come to his rescue. Returning back to the States, Pepper is glad to see him alive, and Tony immediately calls for a press conference, where Agent Coulson of S.H.I.E.L.D. makes contact with her. Stark is now a changed man from his experiences, and declares an immediate shutdown of the weapons manufacturing arm of his company. It's a major shift that Obadiah tries to manage. He's pissed at Tony for essentially killing the company and focusing on the clean energy of their arc reactor technology. This was formerly nothing but a failed showpiece to keep the hippies quiet, until that is, Tony made a working version and put it in his chest. It's not looking good for the company, but Tony has been busy already updating his mini reactor, and poor Pepper Potts has to help him with it by pulling bits of the old one out from his chest. He will die without it, but they finish playing at operation, and he tells Pepper to toss the old one away. Tony has a new enterprise in mind, the Mark II, which he keeps at home and off for company servers. With the benefits of his state-of-the-art technology and a helpful robot arm, he manages to almost kill himself, while Raza is still alive, collecting the remains of the Mark I. Pepper tells him that Obadiah has come for a visit, whilst he nearly kills himself again, because the board is trying to kick him out of the company for killing their share price. He suggests that Tony share his working arc reactor technology, but for now he's going to keep things close to his chest. I apologize. His flight suit project starts to take form, and despite ruining his stuff, he finds his footing and finishes construction. Taking a leap of faith, he goes for an immediate test flight with an inbuilt AI system called Jarvis, who manages the suit's technology. He gets a sudden dose of the inverse Icarus, however, when he flies too high into the atmosphere and freezes the suit. temporarily causing a shutdown. But despite putting a return entry hole through his own house, he returns home to find a nostalgic gift that Pepper has made for him of that first reactor. As an inventor, he's immediately making refinements for the Mark III, including a gold titanium alloy that won't freeze up. He leaves Jarvis in charge of the automated assembly and heads out for a red carpet fundraiser in his name. Miss you, big guy. Obadiah is surprised to see him, and Coulson tries to book Tony in for a debrief. He takes Pepper for a dance, and there's a moment between them. She doesn't want to be just another floozy, but they almost kiss on the rooftop before he goes to fetch some more drinks. But that reporter returns to confront Tony with evidence of Stark Industries still supplying weapons. Obadiah was the one to lock Tony out of his own company, and he's kept the weapons production going behind his back. The 10 Rings are still killing refugees in Afghanistan, and with a quiet fury, he dons the freshly made Mark III flight suit. Displaced villagers are being murdered by the terrorists, until Tony comes in to settle the score. As well as the jet thrusters, this suit has teeth, and he leaves their scumbag commander in the hands of his own victims, before taking a direct shell hit from a tank. But this suit is also tough, and he continues to destroy their forces and weapons placements, much to the dismay of the American Air Force, who were monitoring the area. They've never seen anything like it, and Rhodes calls up Tony to see if a former weapons tech inventor who was kidnapped in the same area knows anything about it. Tony plays the innocent, but then has to avoid a couple of American fighter jets that try to shoot him down as an unknown enemy target. He nearly bites the dust, and after some Millennium Falcon level of hiding, one of the F-22s is damaged in pursuit, with the pilot's eject sequence failing to deploy his chute. Stark dives in and manages to save the pilot, and Rhodes agrees to call the incident a training exercise to keep the attention away from Tony. Pepper is shocked to see him return from live combat. Whilst out in the desert, it turns out that not only was Obadiah directly supplying Raza with the weapons, he was the one that orchestrated the hit on Tony's convoy from the very start. Raza has recovered the Mark I suit for him, though he still lacks a working power source, but Obadiah has no more use for the man and leaves with the armor whilst his team kill the last of the 10 Rings. Locked out of the company, Tony asks Pepper to retrieve the details of Stain's black market dealings in order to destroy the last of the weapons. She doesn't want to help him endanger his own life, but he's driven now by what he truly believes is right. She's all he has, and Pepper feels the same for him. So in his old office, she retrieves the files, but also discovers more, including another suit construction and Obadiah's direct involvement with the hit on Tony. And just then he walks in, and so Pepper does her very best to play it cool in the face of a monster whilst the download completes, and she manages to bluff her way out of the room to take her leave. Suspicious, however, Obadiah realizes what's happened, and Pepper is only able to leave the building thanks to the fortunate presence of S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Coulson, who is visiting yet again to organize that debrief meeting. And so, on the cusp of exposure for his crimes, Obadiah goes all out on his development team to finish building the suit, but his scientists simply don't have the skills to replicate such a small reactor. So instead he pops over and uses his sonic taser on Tony himself, temporarily paralyzing him before pulling the arc reactor directly out of his chest, showing his true colors and leaving him for dead. Pepper, with the support of S.H.I.E.L.D., tells Rhodey what's going down, while Tony tries to drag himself to the original reactor as he goes into cardiac arrest. He almost doesn't make it, but Robot Arm comes to the rescue, saving his life. Obadiah installs the reactor in his Ironmonger suit, and Rhodes gets Tony on his feet, telling him that Pepper is with 5 S.H.I.E.L.D. agents moving in to make the arrest. But Stark knows that won't be enough, and heads on over to help. And he's right. Obadiah makes short work of the agents before almost killing Pepper, before Tony dives in. If Tony's suit is a finely tuned sports car, then Ironmonger is a tank. And as they fight on the streets of LA, Stark is on limited energy with that original cave-made reactor. So he heads into the sky, and Ironmonger very slowly launches into pursuit. The Air Force want to scramble jets, but Rhodey's there to keep things on the down low. Stark keeps climbing, but is eventually caught. However, he's reached his critical altitude, and Obadiah's suit freezes and shuts down. See ya! With only emergency power left, Tony barely lands, but Ironmonger is still going and tries a death grip that he barely escapes. So he sets Pepper to overload the company's large reactor, whilst he buys time to draw Stain into position. Obadiah is heavily armed, however, and shoots him all but down, and so Tony knows that he has to risk his own life, telling Pepper to blow the reactor. A giant energy wave knocks them both out and incapacitates the suits, and Ironmonger tumbles to his death inside the reactor, whilst Tony's body was thankfully thrown clear. Oh my god. And so the following day, whilst Rhodey and Agent Coulson provide a cover story for Tony's whereabouts to keep him away from media attention, he reminds Pepper of their intimate moment on the roof. But she reminds him of the bit where he left to go get drinks and never came back. Yikes. And so at the press briefing, Tony, being Tony, likes the sound of actually being a superhero and tells the world he's Iron Man. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. With Avengers Endgame on its way, I thought it would be nice to take a look where things all started over 10 years ago, and so I hope you've enjoyed having Iron Man crammed inside of you. If you did, please consider giving that subscribe button a click, and I'll see you next time. Take care.